Can a 7-times world champion reinvent yourself in the middle of a technical and emotional storm? How prepared is Lewis Hamilton to lead Ferrari in the second part of the 2025 season? Lewis Hamilton arrived in Ferrari in 2025 carrying more than his titles and his legacy. He brought expectations, an invisible but palpable pressure, and the need to justify one of the most media decisions in the modern history of Formula One. For many, this signing was not just a sports issue. It represented a symbol. The fusion between the most laureate pilot of all time and the most iconic rack of motoring promised a rebirth, a historical revenge against years of shared frustrations between them. But in Formula One, the romantic narrative rarely coincides with the harsh technical reality. From the first kilometers of the season, it was clear that this new chapter would not be simple. In the pre-season tests, although the SF25 showed signs of progress with respect to its predecessor, the car was far from being a dominant car. Ferrari, although he had consolidated his place as the second-best team in 2024, still dragged inconsistencies in terms of strategy, reliability, and balance of the car. And although Italian engineering had taken a step forward for Hamilton, the challenge was even greater. Not only should the new car understand, but to adapt to a completely different structure from Mercedes, where he had had almost absolute control for a decade. Australia's GP was the first impact with that new reality. In classification, neither Leclerc managed to place themselves in outstanding positions. Already in the race, Hamilton barely added a point, trapped in an erratic strategy of the team and wrapped in the wet driving difficulties, after a chaotic day where the rain altered all the plans. The SF25 behaved unpredictably under changing conditions, and Ferrari made wrong strategic decisions that kept him too long on the track with wrong tires. For a pilot like Lewis, accustomed to having control of the variables, that type of internal errors only increased frustration. But perhaps the most revealing was what happened outside the timetable. In later interviews, Hamilton himself admitted to having underestimated the adaptation process. During his time in Mercedes, his criticisms of the car became more frequent, but also more public. In Ferrari, the speech was different. From the beginning, he was willing to commit, even to reinvent his own driving style. He began to adopt the techniques of Charles Leclerc, who has historically known how to squeeze Maranello's cars better than anyone. This decision was not less. It meant abandoning built habits for more than a decade in favor of a new, more aggressive driving philosophy at curve entrance, releasing the accelerator before and loading more brakes. On the track, the results of this effort soon saw each other. Although he did not shine in classification, in the first stints he demonstrated moments of speed, rolling to similar rhythms to those of his teammate. However, the level of trust was still low. Hamilton himself declared that he felt he was operating below his limit, as if the car had a different language that he still could not translate. That lack of fluidity is deadly in an environment as tight as the current one, where the margin between glory and mediocrity can be just a few tenths of a second by return. The situation was not worrying only from sports. The world observed each gesture, each body gesture, every radio, every chronometric data of Hamilton with Ferrari. The trial was immediate. The comparison with Leclerc was inevitable, and in those first days, Monegasco seemed more comfortable, more familiar with the limits of the car. The aura of Hamilton champion remained intact, but the Italian environment, with its traditional media and emotional pressure, would soon question the results if they did not improve. But the beginning of his stage in Ferrari, far from the lights and fanfare of the ad, began with his left foot, in the middle of a tactical and technical storm that revealed how far the rampante Cavallino is still of being a reliable contender, and how much Hamilton will need to push to transform promises into results. Ferrari, meanwhile, understood that he was facing an opportunity. For the first time in many years, he had not only a fast pilot in his ranks, but someone with the necessary authority to change the technical and organizational dynamics of the team. Hamilton's experience, combined with his ability to make decisions under pressure, contributed a tactical maturity that Leclerc, for talent he has, is still developing. In China, the Hamilton-Ferrari binomial showed its first real synergy symptom. The car began to behave as an extension of the pilot, not as an obstacle. The most important thing was not that Hamilton shone on its own. It was that for the first time, Ferrari provided him with the minimum tools to do so. And he replied. The learning line drawn in Australia began to curve up. The complex, slow symbiosis process, full of adjustments and tensions, began to bear fruit. Is it enough to think of a comeback in the championship? Not yet. But the message was clear. Hamilton is awake, focused, and determined to leave a mark on Maranello. And if something was demonstrated in Shanghai, it is that underestimating its ability to adapt, evolve, and compete. It is still a mistake that many are paying expensive. The third Grand Prix of the season in Japan was much more than another race for Ferrari. It was a kind of early verdict. After the ups and downs in Australia and the visible rebound in China, all eyes were put in Suzuka to know if progress was real or simply a statistical illusion. For Lewis Hamilton, it meant something even more personal, to show that he was not only adapted, but that he could start guiding the Scuderia in the right direction. And he did. In sports, Hamilton hasn't won yet, nor has he led significant turns. But that has not been an obstacle to influence the championship. In Japan it was constant, solid, efficient. His rhythm was almost identical to that of Charles Leclerc, but with a critical detail: his ability to read the race in real time and adapt his style. He knew how to conserve tires, he maintained spaces on track when the traffic demanded it, and pressed when the stint allowed it. That risk management, invisible to the casual spectator, is what makes a good pilot a champion. The contrast with Leclerc was increasingly evident. While Charles is still an immense talent, his complaints on the radio, his dependence on optimal conditions, and his tendency to fall into silent frustrations are moving away from the role of leader that many in Ferrari expected him to assume. Instead, Hamilton has begun to operate as a runway director. Not only runs, directs, proposes, order. And that, in a structure like Ferrari, is worth gold. Outside the track, there are also signs of a deep change. Hamilton has been much more active in Maranello's technical base. According to internal reports, he has established a more direct communication channel with the simulation department, has requested greater access to comparison data between colleagues, and has made explicit recommendations on the aerodynamic evolution of the SF25, especially in medium-high load areas. His suggestions are being implemented with an unusual speed in Ferrari, indicating that the technical direction headed by Frédéric Vasseur has deposited a growing confidence in it. With the summer stop at Puerta and the Grand Prix of the Netherlands in sight, the question is inevitable: is Hamilton the leader Ferrari needs? Everything indicates yes. Not for what he has already won, but for how he is building something new from scratch. Not because of its past, but for how you are using your experience to transform a structure that for years lived trapped between nostalgia and frustration. Today, Ferrari needs more than speed. It needs character, temper, and a long-term vision. And Hamilton, with his history, his mistakes, his titles, and his personal reinvention, represents all that. There is still a lot of championship ahead. But if something has been clear in these first races, it is that Lewis Hamilton has not come to Ferrari to retire. He has come to lead, to rebuild, to fight. And even if I still don't say it aloud, he has come to win. Formula One is not simply a speed competition. It is a constant narrative of evolution, pressure, talent, and redemption. And within that always changing story, there are characters that, over time, cease to be simple protagonists to become symbols. Lewis Hamilton is one of them. And his arrival in Ferrari has started a completely new chapter, loaded with history, of expectations, but above all, of questions that still have no definitive answer. What we have seen in the first races of this 2025 season is not a result. It is the beginning of a process. Hamilton has not transformed Ferrari overnight, but he has begun to alter his competitive DNA. He has injected professionalism, strategic criteria, and a winning mentality that for years seemed absent in Maranello. Each adjustment in the SF25, each technical meeting, each stint on track, now carries its footprint. We are not witnessing only a new stage in his career. We are seeing how he tries to rebuild a legend. And that reconstruction is not easy, because in Ferrari it is not enough to be fast. We must resist media pressure, internal criticism, factory policy, and at the same time find a path between the operating chaos and the almost religious demand of its tifosi. Hamilton, on just 3 race weekends, has given clear signs that he is willing to assume that burden. Not because you need to demonstrate something, but because he wants to close his career at the top, not only winning but leaving a mark. And do it in Ferrari would mean more than a title. It would be transcendence. The Netherlands Grand Prix will mark a new turning point. Zandvoort, with its challenging layout, the unpredictable wind of the North Sea, and a completely overturned hobby with Verstappen, will be the perfect setting to measure how much this symbiosis has advanced among the 7-time world champion and the most emblematic team in history. It will be there, after the summer break, when we discover if Hamilton and Ferrari are ready to go beyond the narrative and convert the signals of progress into real results. I want you to respond in comments with total honesty. Do you think Hamilton can return Ferrari to the top this season? Or are we facing a project that, although ambitious, needs more time to mature? Do you see Charles Leclerc ready to share the leadership? Or do you think that internal tension will end up being inevitable? Leave me your opinion.